We're going to be looking at Siddhartha today, the novel written by Hermann Hesse about one man's adventure towards realizing the self. As we've a moment to spare, I'd like to share with you a few lines of the text to whet your appetite. Siddhartha is crossing the river with the help of the ferryman Vasudeva, and they have this pleasant exchange. "You've chosen a great life for yourself," said the passenger. "It must be delightful to live by this river and go out on it every day." Swaying a little from side to side, the rower smiled. "It is delightful, sir, as you say. But isn't every life, isn't everyone's work delightful?" We don't always perhaps see it like that, do we? Just coming up to 8:30 now. Hello, and a warm welcome to Philosophy Live. Today, we're exploring the eye-opening lessons contained in Hermann Hesse's classic book, Siddhartha. I recently reread this book on the recommendation of a friend, and it really moved me. I'm sure that many of you have heard of it. Written in 1919, it was very popular in the hippy counterculture days of the 60s and 70s. The story follows the protagonist, Siddhartha, on his quest for spiritual enlightenment. Spoiler alert, in the ancient language of Sanskrit, the name Siddhartha means the one who has accomplished his goal. So that rather gives the game away, doesn't it? But like us all, he has to go on various different paths and through distinct phases of life before he reaches his goal. It would be impossible to cover all that's contained in this small and potent text, but we can have a brief look at Siddhartha's journey to self-realization, and I will share what touched me, and hopefully we can all find some inspiration for our own journey. Siddhartha's life starts very propitiously. He is the son of a Brahmin or priest, and he spends his time meditating, conversing with the priests and performing sacrifices to the gods. But this does not satisfy him. He had begun to feel the inward stirrings of discontent. So, urged on by his inner voice, he leaves his parents and sets out on his own spiritual quest, along with his childhood friend, Govinda. Siddhartha knows he is missing something, but he doesn't know what. I think many of us have had a taste of that kind of inner yearning. Hesse called this feeling Lebenskrankheit, or sickness with life, and it is something he felt himself, and that he was hoping to heal by writing Siddhartha. Hesse was a great scholar of Eastern religions and philosophies, including Buddhism and Hinduism, and was well versed in the ancient language of Sanskrit. And all of these pointed to one remedy for this life sickness: self-realization. Hesse wrote, "What we can and should change is ourselves, our impatience, egoism, including our spiritual egoism, our sense of hurt, our lack of love, and forbearance." So Siddhartha realizes he needs to change himself, but how and what exactly? He and Govinda join the Samanas, an extreme group of ascetics who believe that the path to enlightenment is through self-denial, and he learns to endure all kinds of discomforts, such as hunger and pain, and overcome them. At this stage, he sees the world as a facade, hiding the truth. He still feels unfulfilled, however, and at this point he meets the Buddha. Even though he can see that the Buddha has reached perfection, Siddhartha finds his teachings cannot take him to the same place, so he moves on again, alone this time, as Govinda wishes to stay. Siddhartha believes that he can no longer learn from teachers. No one will ever attain redemption through doctrine, he says. He does have some measure of awakening, and there are some key things he now knows, which are a great reminder to us all. He saw that the body was definitely not the self, nor the interplay of the senses, so it was also not the intellect, and no more was it the understanding or acquired wisdom. And he also sees the world now not as a problem that needs to be shunned, but rather something magnificent and perfect. Hesse writes, "He looked around as if he was seeing the world for the first time. It was all beautiful, all mysterious and magical. What was real and what was meaningful were not concealed somewhere behind things. They were in things, in each and every one of them." The next stage of his journey now begins, symbolized by him crossing the river, helped by the ferryman Vasudeva, who mysteriously tells him that they will meet again. Siddhartha enters the city, where he spends many years living a life of sexual pleasure, business, self-indulgence, and gambling, more like what we would call a normal life. Unsurprisingly, perhaps, this hedonistic approach yet again fails to slake his spiritual thirst. His lover, Kamala, points out to him what he is missing. "You love nobody," she says. Have you noticed that you have a quiet inner voice that tries to guide you if you're still enough to hear it? Siddhartha hears his, trying to speak to him when he is living out of balance in the city. Hesse writes, "Sometimes, deep inside, he noticed a quiet, murmuring voice chiding him, protesting softly. He realized that he was living a lie, that to all appearances he was perfectly happy and even sometimes enjoyed life, but that real life was passing him by, leaving him untouched." Have you ever had that feeling? Heeding the inner voice, he leaves the city and its distractions and finds himself back at the river that he first crossed years ago as a samana. And utterly disgusted with himself, he craves death as an escape and considers throwing himself into the river. This is the great turning point, when he has reached the lowest ebb in his life. What suddenly comes back to him is the word Om, that he used to meditate on, and he falls into an exhausted sleep next to the river, sounding Om. On awakening, he feels a joyful love for everything and realizes that Kamala had been right. His problem was that he had been unable to love anyone or anything. He meets Vasudeva, the ferryman, again, and his behavior as he helps people with their journeys over the river and of self-reflection instruct Siddhartha until he eventually becomes the ferryman himself. The love that had been missing is now appreciated, and Siddhartha feels childlike, as many of the great religions and philosophies of the world tell us we need to be. He has finally sacrificed his own will. And he says, "Now I stand here, once more beneath the sun, as I did when I was a small child. I have nothing. I know nothing. I can do nothing. I have learned nothing. How wonderful." His inner voice tells him to stay by the river, and he learns from it in a way he has never been able to learn from a teacher before. The river here represents unity and eternity, as it is always flowing and recycling. He hears all the different voices of life in the river and realizes the unity of them all. All the voices, all the goals, all the yearning, all the suffering, all the pleasure, everything that made up good and evil, everything taken together, that was the world. Everything in harmony made up the continuum of events, the music of life, the one word, Om, perfection. At the end of the book, he once again meets his childhood friend Govinda, who is still in search of the truth. Siddhartha now takes on the role of teacher and instructs him. "A person is never wholly good or bad. It only seems this way because we labor under the illusion that time is real. But time is not real, Govinda. And if time isn't real, then the apparent division between this world and the eternal, between suffering and serenity, between good and bad, is also illusory. Govinda asks what we would probably ask in response to this: how can this be? Siddhartha tells him, we are both of us sinners, but someday the sinner will be reborn as Brahma. And now see, this someday is nothing more than a mirage. No, today, now, the future Buddha already exists in the sinner, in you, in everyone. The world, my dear friend Govinda, is neither imperfect nor on a long, tortuous path to perfection. No, it is already perfect at all times. This may sound like an extraordinary thing to say, but we are all actually familiar with this concept. A very small example is when I'm writing one of these talks. I begin by not knowing what to write and wondering how on earth I'm going to complete it, but somehow it always gets done. I'm aware, even at the beginning, that the finished article does somehow exist. I don't know if writing this book did help Hesse with his sickness with life, but there are certainly many pointers that we can take away from this book. Namely, thinking, knowledge, and teachings can only take us so far. We need to listen to our inner voice, and we must be free as little children. We can learn from the river that we are all part of the unity of the universe, that we need to go with the flow, and the only time we ever have is now. But we receive the key instruction near the end of the book, and I'll just share that with you now. Siddhartha says, and here's a lesson that will make you smile, Govinda. It seems to me that love is the most important thing of all. Great thinkers might want to see the world through the world to explain it away, to make little of it. But to me, the single most important thing in life is to love the world. We are not here to hate each other, but to treat ourselves and every single thing that exists with love, admiration, and respect. So thank you for listening to the talk. If you've enjoyed it, please do like it and share it, and have a lovely day.